Hi, I'm Steve from Nearly Wild, and today I'm with Ian Steele from
Treflach Farm.
And Ian, tell us a little bit about Treflach Farm, because obviously I know quite a lot of the story, and it's a fascinating one. Just give me a little bit of a potted history, if you like.
Okay, so essentially it's a small hillside family farm, 100 acres, 40 hectares, up in the hills above Oswestry Street in North Shropshire on the border with North Wales. It's a family farm. It's been in the family since 1904, so it's now 115. My dad, before me, was a dairy farmer. He got sick while I was working away. I never wanted to be a farmer, moved away as soon as I possibly could, went to college, university, and got a job overseas. But then my dad, in engineering, that's right, in petrochemical engineering, no less. And then moved away with that, took me all over the world, which was lots of fun. But then my dad got sick in 2006, and I moved back to the farm to take it over, to do something with it. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, whether to rent it out, sell it, or do something different. But what I did know is that we couldn't farm in the same way that it had previously been managed. The dairy herd had already gone. There was a small suckler herd left of beef cattle, and I'd always had a love for cattle, but still there wasn't enough land to farm commercially in a post-war commercial fashion, using artificial inputs, man-made fertilisers and animal feed. So I looked around to see what the farm could do to produce an income for both my dad while he was still around, and my mum who still lives on the farm, and also my family. And after 13 years, we've now got some kind of a plan. We've got a number of businesses running on the farm. Essentially, there's the farm itself, which is the land, the infrastructure, the buildings, and also the animals. So primary production of meat. We've got outdoor pigs and cattle, grass-finished cattle. So that's a very important point, the grass-finished bit, but we'll talk about that, I'm sure, at some stage in the future. We've got the food business, where we add value to our own animals. So we make pies, pasties, sausage rolls, quiches. Treflach Farm, they're very tasty. And available online.
I have to agree with that. They are very good. I've got a lot in the freezer at the moment.
And then we've got the distribution business. We found it really difficult to be able to, and I think this is part of the conversation, found it really difficult both to find the ingredients we needed to make the produce we wanted to make, but then we also found it difficult to get our products to the marketplace. So we actually set up our own chilled distribution business to make that happen, and we'll talk about that later. And then the fourth business, we run a community interest company, which is a legal format of company where we provide horticultural therapy and training programs for a wide range of client groups, including adults with learning difficulties, adults with mental health issues, kids with behavioural issues, and the general public. We offer opportunities to get involved with animal husbandry, animal welfare projects, land management projects, and all kinds of outdoor-based activities that creates well-being, and that's one of the reasons why I moved back to the farm, because it wasn't necessarily, partly a sense of duty, coming back to look after the place or to decide what to do when my dad was passing away, but also it was because I was finding modern life a bit soulless and difficult to cope with, and in hindsight I guess that would be called mental health issues. And actually coming back to the farm, but in a different way as an adult rather than as a child, with no power, be able to engage with the outdoors gives me an enormous sense of well-being. It calms me down, and I can function and relate to other people a lot more easily because I feel I've got the space. And also it means because the types of jobs that are available on farms, they're time-bound. You've got to get a job finished, you can see the progress, and then there's an end product. Whether that end product is a pork pie, or whether it's a newborn calf, or whether it's a field of straw or hay, then that comes off into the barn, then it gives you that sense of I've achieved that. And I wanted other people to be able to engage with that as well, and understand where the food comes from that they're putting on their plate 3 times a day.
Fascinating. I mean, the story, and obviously we're not going to have time to go through all of this today, the story of what Ian's been doing on the farm is fascinating. And there's lots of different elements, as Ian says. I mean, it's ended up with 4 sort of core elements now. But
there's plenty of other things as well. Yeah,
a lot of other things that have been going on alongside that. And I think that what I'm particularly interested in today, and hopefully we'll have time to see Ian again and do some future interviews, and don't forget the pork pies. I think one of the things we wanted to just talk a little bit more about today was this whole issue of getting into the marketplace and the 2 ends that Ian described. One is the supply chain to you, effectively, of the meats and the other product that you need to make things, and then also the selling on. And many of the small businesses we've talked to, this is one of the issues that they struggle with in the early days particularly. Mm-hmm. I wonder if you could just give a few insights to the stories you've been through on that.
Of course. Well, we'll start at the end, if that's okay, with the distribution side of the finished product, and we'll move back to the beginning with the ingredients, because they're somewhat related, but it's easier to start at the end. So forgive me if it.
And I think that's good, actually. And sorry to interrupt, but I think that one of the points I think is really important, and often particularly nature-based businesses don't think enough about, is actually who's going to buy the end product.
Exactly.
And the marketplace.
Exactly.
So I'm really pleased that you've done that and started that end.
Because one of the issues with farming and diversification projects on existing farms is that oftentimes you've got a fantastic product. The farmer has been doing something for years and either producing milk or grain or whatever, and it's been sold into a larger buying group, whether that's Milk Mark or one of the big dairies, or whether that's a commodity buyer for grain or the livestock market for animals. But if a farm wants to diversify and actually start producing that fantastic quality product, but selling it for a higher margin, they've got the product, but they don't always have the route to market. Yeah. And I think oftentimes people start like selling in farmers markets and adding value in their own little kitchen and making things, but and they're creating this monster because they've got then this product, wonderful product that they've invested with infrastructure, getting their food hygiene regulations sorted, whatever, but they don't always think about, well, who's actually going to be buying it down the line. Farmers markets and things are great starting points, but you're never going to create a viable long-term business. You could create a lifestyle, but from my perspective, you can't create a viable long-term business with employees and everything else just in farmers markets, because if it rains you don't sell anything, and if you've paid a wage then you've actually lost money. Oftentimes larger businesses who attend events do so as part of a marketing strategy, as part of a larger business plan, and they're looking to move into wholesale. So my strategy was not to have a strategy and make lots of mistakes and work out what worked. And so I was one of those small farmers who had a wonderful product or set of products that was being grown on the farm anyway, that I wanted to invest in adding value myself rather than paying an outside company to sell my raw product. Or our raw product when my dad was here. And so we started making produce, sausages, bacon, raw produce, because we had the animals, and we built a little butchery. And we started doing farmers markets, realised very quickly that that's a lifestyle, but it's not a real business. Because it took you away from the core business when you were standing on the farmers market, potentially not selling anything, bringing everything back and putting it in the freezer. So I started looking at, well, okay, now we've got these products we need to sell, where can I sell them? Because I'd moved back to Shropshire from London, my initial thought process was try and engage with individuals that I knew who were still down in London. And using email and the internet, I was taking individual orders from individuals, and I would drive down to London in my little Corsa with an insulated box with whatever I could get my hands on. And I started working with other small-scale producers who I'd met at these farmers markets, who were in the same position, who were looking for other avenues. So I was able to offer a wider range of products to the individuals delivering to in London. So things like honey and bread and pies and the meat of from our own animals, and cheese and all kinds of different bits and pieces. What I found was that I was driving down to London in the car with the insulated box and driving around workplaces, handing out the products. And I hit a limit. I could only deliver to so many places in a day because I would drive down to London, do the deliveries and drive back. And it's 4 hours drive from here to London. So it'd be a 12-hour day, driving 4 hours, delivering for 4 hours, then driving back for 4 hours. And it wasn't sustainable. And I couldn't fit enough things in the van, in the car, and it was just exhausting. However, I continued at it because I didn't have a master plan. It was just trying to figure out how to make it work. Started out going down once a month in the little car, then it went to once a fortnight, then once a week, because I thought actually if I could do more, maybe I can cover the overheads and maybe I can build it. So as in a lot of businesses, when the founder has got somewhat of an idea but doesn't really have the full picture yet. If something isn't working and the answer is to work harder rather than working smarter, and I made the classic mistake, and all I did was I just worked harder, and arguably I still do that because we're just making it up, right? There's no magic formula.
Absolutely. And I have to say, Ian, I've done the same, exactly the same numerous times.
Absolutely.
And I agree with you totally. I mean, that is always what we do. We work harder and we don't have even enough time to think and work through those processes.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
So I worked it up to going down once a week in the car, and then I had to get a slightly larger car, and then I got a small van, and then I needed an insulated van, and blah, blah, blah. But it started getting to the point where I couldn't serve the individuals, and I realised that to be able to fill the vehicle up, as soon as I went up to a larger vehicle, I suddenly had space that I needed to fill. And so I started contacting little shops and delis and independent retailers and outlets down in London, garden centres and pubs and restaurants, just asking if they would be interested in the products that I was selling down there as well. And I started getting some positive feedback. I met some good people and made some good contacts. I realised that as soon as I moved up to a larger vehicle, I needed to fill that space as quickly as possible, because otherwise it was costing me money, and I needed to fill it because of increased overheads with regard to diesel and the value of the vehicle I'd bought. And so I started contacting independent companies, shops, delis, garden centres, pubs, restaurants down in London. I started getting some good feedback, and I started supplying down into London both my own produce, but then also produce from these other small-scale producers that I'd met at the farmers markets and other events. I realised very quickly that the average spend of the individuals I was delivering to was about £15-20. The average spend of the shops was 100. So very quickly, the number of individuals I was supplying to went down because of natural turnover. I just wasn't putting the effort into replacing the ones who were stopping ordering, and I was putting my efforts into building the wholesale customers up. That got to a point where, after a number of years, long story short, we got to a point where we had 6 long-wheel-based Sprinter vans, 4 based in London, 2 here, and 4 drivers, full-time drivers. And we were delivering both our own produce and delivering produce that we were selling on behalf of other people. And we were also working with small-scale producers, delivering their products on their behalf. So picking up from their production facilities, whether that was in North Shropshire, taking it down to the southeast, London and the home counties, or whether producers based down there, picking their produce up and bringing it back up to the northwest. The tail was very much definitely wagging the dog at this point. I didn't set up the business to become a distribution manager. It really wasn't and something very much, I was driving full time as well as running the farm, as well as running the food business. I got a phone call, and I think it was something like the week before Christmas, and I remember I was parked up getting a half an hour kip in Milton Keynes, halfway on the way home back from doing deliveries in London, and it was one of my best suppliers who supplied pies to us, and that we supplied them with meat to go in the pies, and then we sold the pies down in London. And they said it wasn't working for them, they had to quit. So almost instantly, very, very quickly, I offered to buy their business from them. So we actually set up the bakery on the farm, bought their bakery lock, stock and barrel, bought their ingredients, their recipes, their equipment, everything, their expertise, brought that to the farm, set it up here, and that's how we moved effortlessly from making sausages and bacon into pies, because the extra margin and the flexibility it allows you, because we can batch produce pies, whereas the animals go off, we bring them back, we put them in the freezer, and then we can cook off the meat on a weekly basis, whereas with the fresh meat, we had to have fresh every week. That's a real struggle for a small-scale producer, and that's something that, going back to the beginning, talking about the ingredients, we've really struggled to be able to find small-scale producers who can supply us with the ingredients for our food business because of that continuity of supply issue.
Right.
Anyway, so that's how we set up the bakery business, and we had to grow the distribution business. One of the things we found that, a year or so ago is that the tail was wagging the dog. We were over-reliant on a small number of large customers. Right. I think that can happen in any business.
Yep, very definitely.
But it's one of those things that things are going well, business is growing, customers are giving you more and more work, and you invest in that infrastructure, the vans and the people, to be able to serve those customers. And then something happens where your price point no longer works for them, or they want to grow past a point at which you can serve them, and they make a business decision and just move somewhere else. And no customer is forever. I found there's a natural turnover of customers. Absolutely. And you always lose them, and you're always picking up new customers, and you have to put work into finding these new customers. But one of the issues is when you lose a very large customer, it takes a long time to wind down, because you might be overstaffed or have too much infrastructure, and paying HP or whatever on vehicles, as we were. So that had a significant negative impact on our business for a number of months, which was really a painful process, but a learning opportunity, because I now know that I need a more distributed customer and supplier network, so that we build in that resilience. From those 6 vans, we've gone back down to 4 vans, and from the 4 drivers, we've gone back down to 2 full-time, but actually 1 full-time and 2 part-time. Right. And that makes a lot more sense for us, where it's a much more even keel we're on now, and we're actually focusing on Treflach Farm as a customer and servicing Treflach Farm and our food business, rather than chasing other low-margin but high-turnover business, which was at one stage, it was good business, but it was risky, and we gambled, and for a time it worked, and for a time it didn't. So it's just one of those things.
I think that's really fascinating sort of insight into some of the key issues there, Ian, and I maybe just pick out a couple of the bigger ones. I thought, not necessarily bigger ones, but ones that are particularly striking me in relation to what I'm hearing from other nature-based businesses. This idea that we have to keep growing. As a sort of driver. If you're growing, then you're doing well. Yeah,
if you're not going forward, you're going backwards.
And I think actually we find in nature-based businesses, it's more about how we're creating a holistic whole, of which, if you like, the supply chain is feeding that whole, not becoming completely dominated.
And building resilience, rather than building an upside-down pyramid where you're reliant on a smaller number of inputs, which, if they're taken away, the whole thing falls down.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that really strikes me is this thing about the big customer. And maybe those of you who are based in more rural areas, often I think what people do is they find public sector body or a large charity where they can get a framework contract, and they build a business up with a very strong base.
Oh, it's exactly the same with a dairy farmer selling to a buying group, or selling to Arlo or a large dairy. They've got this contract, they feel secure, but the big customer has all the power.
And even in the public sector, exactly the same. The framework contract comes to the end, or there's a change of policy or direction.
Or change of individual.
Change of individual, absolutely. It is all about relationships, isn't it? So I think that's really important for people to be aware of. I just wanted one last little bit to understand from you, Ian, because I know you and I have had a chat about this in the past, this problem of the actual procurement of the inputs, if you like, from others in that sort of other end of the supply chain, from the suppliers themselves.
What I found is that in exactly the same way that I had issues with getting my produce out to the customer, I found that other small suppliers have had exactly the same issues, and they've gone about solving that problem in different ways to the way that I have. I managed it by setting up essentially a fully fledged other business to be able to distribute, but that hasn't been the goal or the drive or the way that other people have wanted to solve that problem, and so it's very, very difficult. A lot of customers or smaller businesses who were suppliers to me at the beginning of my business are no longer in business because they've hit a brick wall. Yes. Or they're still in business, but they've gone down the route of supplying a buying group. They've gone down and they supply one customer who then does all the distribution for them.
Right.
Or they've gone very, very local and they've gone back to just servicing their immediate area. High margin, low turnover.
Yeah.
So they've fragmented, and I find it very difficult to find a medium-sized, family-based, high-quality business that can supply my food business with the raw ingredients that I need. Very, very difficult.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. And just for those of you watching, just one thing I think needs to be stressed is the environmental values that Ian places inside his business and within his supply chain. So a key, I think, part of what you've been trying to do is to ensure that you're getting food from as environmentally friendly, productive systems as is realistically possible or available, trying to find better ways of working all of your business elements in, I suppose, what nowadays tends to get called a nature-based way, but an environmentally friendly way. So that obviously is presumed also putting restrictions on some of the potential opportunities in the supply chain.
And it makes everything much more expensive because you're putting those restrictions and wanting to work with individuals or organisations who have those values. They naturally have a higher overheads and have to pass that on to their customers. And so we find ourselves naturally buying in more expensive ingredients and inputs, other inputs, compostable bags and things. So all our packaging is either compostable or recyclable or reusable. But that's just one element. All the way through our production process and all the way through our supply chain, we build in the sustainability aspect, but that comes at a cost. And then we find that restricts our potential customer base because we have a higher price point than Greggs, for example.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate your time, Ian, today. I'm hoping we're going to have a few more conversations in the future. But thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Steve.
For those of you who want to hear more about this, obviously at the end of below the video, you'll see more information about Treflach Farm and the links to both the farm and all the activities that Ian hosts, and obviously the product. Don't forget the pies.
Thank you very much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. If you liked it, subscribe. If you didn't like it, leave a reason in the comments as to why.